Hi, I'm Derek Mooney and this is Read Right Now. This week I'm at the Steam Museum in Straffan in County Kildare, and I'm here to look at how people who built steam engines very cleverly got around their problems with reading and writing. Open from April to September, this estate is more than just a museum. There's a house and gardens too. Also in the programme this week, we'll be meeting our learner Mary from Killinarden, which is on the outskirts of Dublin, and she'll be telling us how going back to learning has changed her life.
The difference going back to school has made for me has given me more confidence in myself. I know what I can do and what I can't do, and I know if I work at it, I can achieve anything that I want to.
Later in the programme, we'll be catching up with Terry at Powerscourt in County Wicklow, and she'll be telling us why reviewing your progress is an important part of the learning process. We'll also have learning points on understanding homophones, words that sound the same but are spelled differently, spelling suffixes and filling out voter registration forms. Now I'm off to do some exploration and you can catch up with Mary. This week's learner, Mary, left school early because she didn't feel she was learning a lot while she was there. But having recently joined the local library, she now sees learning in a totally different light.
I joined the library about 3.5 months ago for the first time in my life. This is the best bit of plastic I ever had and I'll ever have. I came in, I had my nephews with me, and I sat down here and there was families here. It was so peaceful and yet it was so jolly. The atmosphere in the place was brilliant. And I was excited and I was saddened. I was saddened because this is the first time it happened. I just said to myself, why wasn't I like that when I was a child? I hated school, I hated going to school. I always thought I was discriminated against. All they seen was my mother was a widow with 7 kids. You down the back, sure, what would you want to know? You won't have a career. You'll just go, when you leave here, you'll just go into a job and get married. And it's funny, when I was a child, I always played school. We always played school and being the teacher. I don't think I ever played being a pupil. I always wanted to be a teacher. And maybe that's because I didn't like school. Spelling was a no-go. I could spell my name and my address, people's name, but I just couldn't turn on the light in my head. I just couldn't click. I left school when I was 13 because I was sick of the way I was treated. And also I think as well through fear, because I was going on to a next level of education and I knew I wouldn't have been able for it. So it was much easier to get a job than it was to stay in school. I'd have to say I got more of an education in work than I did in my school days. The bit that I could spell, I learned in work because dockets had come down and you had to fill in your bonus sheet. And I learned to spell a few words to fill in the bonus sheet. I always panicked, broke out in a cold sweat when I had to fill in a piece of paper. Or if someone asked me to write down their name and an address, you know. If I was talking to someone and I was saying, give us your telephone number, and you'd give the name and address, I kind of go panicky and I'd shake inside.
Like many other learners, Mary feels that spelling is her biggest challenge in learning to read and write. This is hardly surprising when you're beginning to learn and to use new words. You can find that many of them sound the same, but are spelt differently. Homophones are words that sound the same, but have a different meaning and spelling. This may seem a bit confusing, but let's look at some examples that we heard Mary using. Mary said, I joined the library about 3.5 months ago. But we can hear the same sound I in other sentences, such as, the sun hurts my eyes, so I wear sunglasses. We can hear the sound I'll in, this is the best bit of plastic I'll ever have, and also in, the bride walked down the aisle. The sound too can be heard in, I always wanted to be the teacher. I came to the library with my 2 nephews. I wanted to learn too. There are hundreds of homophones in English, so you may have to look at the words that come before and after them to see which meaning makes sense. A good trick with these words is to write them down together when you find them and draw a picture beside them to help you remember which is which. As you begin using them, you'll soon find that you're able to tell them apart quite quickly.
Now, if you want to learn more about homophones, all you have to do is get a copy of the Read Right Now workbook. Just call us on 1800 20 20 65 and we'll send one out to you in the post. Now, while Terry tells you why it's important to review your learning, I'm going in here to have a look around.
Thanks, Derek. This week I'm in the beautiful Powerscourt estate in Enniskerry in County Wicklow, and I'll be looking at reviewing learning.
When you're learning, whether it's learning to write, to use a mobile phone or to cook a new recipe, it's important for you to know how you're doing. Are you achieving what you want to achieve? Are you finding it too difficult or maybe too easy? Is what you're learning relevant to you?
There are 4 stages in learning. The first stage is where you don't have a skill, but you don't know you don't have it because it's just not relevant to your life at this point.
Let's look at an example. The gardens here are spectacular, and if you've never done any gardening, you might mistakenly believe that it's quite easy.
The second stage is where you want to have that skill and you decide to do something about it.
Let's imagine you've bought your first house with a garden and you decide you want to get stuck in. Suddenly you realise you'd like to know about planting flowers, about trimming trees and pruning roses. So you decide to buy a book or enrol on a gardening course.
The third stage is where you're practising the skill, and this can take a lot of effort and energy on your part. Say in gardening terms, it might mean knowing where exactly on the stem to prune the roses or at what time of year to plant certain species.
Maybe you have to refer to books or notes to remember. The final stage is where you can do the task with ease without ever having to think about it. Now you can grow prize-winning roses, you keep your lawn cut like the green on a golf course, and have the neighbours knocking on the door asking for your advice.
No matter what you're learning, you'll be at one of those stages. Now, by sticking with it, by getting help and advice if you have any difficulties, you will reach that final goal where you're able to do the task without having to give it your full attention.
Mary isn't quite at the final stage of her learning journey, but she certainly feels that going back to learning was a turning point in her life, a turning point that opened up a lot of other opportunities.
This is Killinarden Family Resort Centre. When I walked through these doors 6 years ago, it was to do a personal development course. At the end of the 16 weeks, we were asked to fill in a piece of paper to say what we got out of the course. I was the last person to stand up and say what they got out of it. And I just showed my piece of blank paper and said, I'm sorry, I couldn't. I've never written anything down on paper before. I couldn't, never sent a birthday card, never sent a postcard, I didn't know how to write. So the facilitator said, don't worry, Mary. Well, I'll talk to Sister Mary, she was the project leader at the time. And we had an open day 6 months down the line. As from the open day, I got a letter in the post saying to go for an interview. And when I went for the interview, the lady that was interviewing me, she assessed me, and I thought I would have needed a one-to-one, but she said no, go into a group. I didn't tell people for the first 6 months that I was going to literacy classes, and actually I didn't even call it literacy. I just, after the 6 months, told everyone I was going back to school. Now I don't mind, I'll tell anyone I'm going back because I'm bad at spelling. Okay, Mary? I think from the day I stood up and said, I can't spell, I've never filled in a form, I've never filled in a letter. I seem to become a different person. The literacy classes made me feel I could achieve anything I wanted. When I was doing the literacy class, I was still attending the centre here. I done an awful lot of volunteering. Volunteered for the creche, anything. This is all of what goes on in the centre, the courses. This is a group of women. They're called the Friendship Group. You have to be over 55 to attend. That's the music club that's at the starting up. That's oil painting. This is my baby here. This is what I'm responsible for. I never thought I'd see the day when I'd be tutoring. I'd be giving classes. This is the flower arrangement, and this is the classes I give. I never thought I'd be making an impact in other people's lives. And I was presented 6 months ago with this award for all the volunteer work I do in the centre and in the community. I'm now still going to school. I think I'll be going to school till I'm in a Zimmer frame, but I'm happy to be where I am today.
Mary has turned her life around by going back to learning, and she's now unafraid to admit that she still finds spelling quite difficult. When you're spelling, it may help to learn how to use suffixes. Suffixes are word endings that are added to the end of root words to change their meaning or to make new words. An example of a suffix is the full at the end of joyful. Other examples of suffixes include ness, ly, ous, er, and est. When you add suffixes to words that end with y, there are some rules you need to consider. Let's say you want to add the suffix full to a word. If the word doesn't end in y, you simply add the full. So success becomes successful and hope becomes hopeful. But when you add suffixes to words that end in y, you need to look at the letter that comes before the y. If the letter before the y is a vowel, you keep the y and then add the suffix. A, E, I, O and U are vowels. Every other letter is a consonant. The word play has an A before the Y, and the word joy has an O before the Y. So you simply add the suffix and they become playful and joyful. However, when words end in Y without a vowel before them, we need to replace the Y with an I. Examples of these words include beauty, crazy and lonely. By replacing the Y with an I and then adding the suffix, you get beautiful, crazily and loneliness. Remembering this simple rule about checking the letter before the Y will help you decide how to spell the endings of Y words. And with practice, you'll find this becomes automatic.